And staying on China, of course, U.S. Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner is under fire for making little progress on the issue of the Chinese renminbi. U.S. lawmakers say that Beijing's unwillingness to allow the yuan to rise depresses the price of goods that are made in China. But Geithner says it is up to China to decide on its currency regime.
They're a sovereign country. And our hope is, of course, they're going to decide, as you heard the President Hu say a few weeks ago, that it is in China's interests to move.
All right, to talk more about the Chinese economy and currency, let's get out to Johanna Chua, chief economist at Asia Pacific at Citi. Johanna, great to see you, and thank you so much for dropping in. Of course, just as Chung Lei was running through some of the numbers, the data points were mixed. But if you look at some of the key points like CPI, PPI, quite strong, and the gap was pretty big as well, about 4 percentage points or so. The export numbers were strong. You could argue this certainly puts the pressure on the Chinese to move on the currency, but the chatter that we're getting on the ground is that is not going to be the case. These data points were lagging indicators, and that the Chinese want to take a wait-and-see attitude.
Well, you know, there's certainly a risk that they could be delayed in terms of the policy move on the currency. But right now, we're still kind of holding out hope that they will move. I think probably the most spectacular number this week was really the export number, and the fact that China's trade balance shifted to a much larger than expected trade surplus of about $19.5 billion in May. And then you've got the upcoming G20 meetings in later this month. We think that this is a good window of opportunity for China to move on the renminbi, given that external pressure coming from the U.S. has softened. A lot of speculative positions on the renminbi has been unwound in the market, given what's happened in the last couple of weeks. And also, you know, right now, I think it's still in China's interest to rebalance its economy and adopt a more flexible exchange rate. So our house view is they still move, but, you know, of course, there's always risks that, you know, it could be a little bit longer than what we're expecting. And certainly, market doesn't seem to be pricing in a lot of appreciation on the currency.
Johanna, it's Anna here in London. Of course, sometimes the effect of currency moves has a bit of a lagged effect on economic data. And of course, one of the phenomenon over recent weeks has been, and recent months, has been the devaluation of the European currency, the euro. And that is obviously of great interest to China and its export environment. Do you think the longer we wait, the less likely China is going to be to move on its currency, because the more impact it's going to feel from that weaker euro?
Well, I mean, certainly at the moment, if you look at the export data in China, at the moment, it's still fairly strong, even export growth to Europe. And you're right that I think a lot of the risks in growth in Europe is maybe going to come with a lag. And so perhaps there's more risk that, you know, export outlook in China is going to soften given the strong renminbi versus the euro. So you're right that could, if we miss this window of opportunity to move on the renminbi, then there is a risk that it could take longer given the outlook on Europe and the euro. But having said that, I do think that it's still, you know, there's still concern. There's still going to be growing pressure from the U.S. that needs to be taken into account. And in reality, it's the U.S. trade balance with China that's going to matter in terms of the bilateral relation between those two countries and the debate about flexibility on the currency.
Right, and also there's this other view that this 50% pop they saw in the rate of exports growth was actually, in fact, triggered by the rush to get as much exports out there, because a lot of people at that time, exporters and importers, were worried about a renminbi appreciation that was very imminent.
Well, you know, it's hard to tell exactly how much is front-loading of exports or not. That is possible, but, you know, it's very hard to determine how much of that explains what's happened in the data.
Johanna, thank you very much for joining us today. Johanna Chua, chief economist for Asia Pacific at Citi.